October 1958. Cold wind swept across the military base in Friedberg, West Germany. 200 soldiers stood in formation at dawn. Among them, a face everyone in the world knew: Elvis Presley. Now just Private Presley. One man in uniform among many, when Sergeant James Miller marched down the line. His eyes lit up the moment he stopped in front of Elvis. He despised everything. The young man represented the fame, the money, the screaming girls, the easy life. To Miller, Elvis was soft, a showpiece in a world that demanded steel. "Well, look who we have here," Miller said loudly, his voice sharp as a blade. "Our little Hollywood princess. Tell me, Presley back at Graceland, do you have maids to shine your boots for you?" No one dared to breathe. 200 soldiers waited for the king to react. Elvis stood perfectly still, eyes forward, saying nothing. "I asked you a question." "Private Miller Barker," Elvis replied quietly, calm as still water. "No." "Sergeant, I shine my own boots." Miller bent down. The boots were spotless, perfect, not a flaw in sight. It only made him angrier. He yanked Elvis's tie, twisting it off-center. "There. Now it's crooked. Fix it." Elvis's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. He straightened his tie without a word. "You know what your problem is." Presley Miller's voice rose, slicing through the cold air. "You think you're special because girls scream your name. But here, you're nobody. Just another pampered celebrity playing soldier." The silence thickened. Some men pitied him. Some smirked. Some agreed. Elvis inhaled slowly, then smiled. A small, calm smile, not proud, not angry, simply at peace. "Yes, Sergeant." That was all. Miller froze for a second. He had wanted a fight, something to justify punishment. But Elvis gave him nothing. Dismissed, he barked and turned away. But something unsettled him, a strange feeling he couldn't name. That night, in the dim yellow light of the barracks, Elvis lay awake on the top bunk, staring at the ceiling. From below, Private Bobby Henderson whispered, "Elvis, everyone saw how he treated you. You should report him." Elvis was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "My mama used to tell me something. The best way to destroy your enemy is to make him your friend. Tomorrow, I'm going to find out if she was right." Bobby didn't understand. No one did. But the next morning, everything changed. Before sunrise, the air was thick with fog. The trumpet hadn't even sounded yet. But Elvis was already up 5:30 a.m. sharp. He dressed neatly, tightened his tie, and stepped into the freezing morning. Across the yard, Sergeant Miller was alone, hauling heavy iron beams to set up the obstacle course. When Elvis approached, the sergeant looked up, suspicious. "What do you want?" "Presley." Elvis stood straight, his voice steady. "Permission to help you set up for drills." "Sergeant." Miller frowned, caught off guard. "Help me, after what happened yesterday." "Yes, Sergeant. It's a two-man job, and you're doing it alone." No sarcasm, no hidden edge, just sincerity. Miller studied his face, waiting for the trick, but found none. "Fine," he muttered. "Start with those barriers." Elvis went to work without hesitation. lifted heavy logs, stretched wire, hammered posts. No complaints, no small talk, no bitterness, just quiet, steady labor. After nearly an hour, Miller finally asked, "Presley, why are you doing this?" Elvis paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yesterday, you called me a Hollywood princess. Maybe you were right. I came in thinking my fame meant something here. But it doesn't. Here, I'm just Private Presley. And if I'm going to be a real soldier, I have to act like one. That means helping when help is needed, even if the person needing help humiliated me yesterday." Miller said nothing. In 20 years of service, he had never heard words like that. When the bugle sounded, Elvis simply said, "We should finish." "Sergeant, formations in 15. They looked across the completed course as the first light of dawn touched the frost. Two men once divided by pride now stood in quiet respect. That afternoon, during a training exercise, fate tested that bond. The platoon was crossing a steep embankment when Sergeant Miller slipped. The ground gave way beneath him, and he crashed hard to the bottom. His leg twisted at an awful angle. "Man down," someone shouted. Elvis didn't hesitate. He slid down the slope, reaching Miller first. "Don't move. Sergeant, help's coming," he said, voice calm but urgent. Miller gripped his arm, trembling with pain and emotion. "Yesterday, I was wrong about you. Presley, don't talk." "Sergeant," Elvis replied softly. "No. Let me. I thought you were fake, a spoiled star who couldn't last a week. But I was wrong." When the medics arrived, Miller refused to let go of Elvis's hand, and before the entire unit, he did something unthinkable. He saluted him, a sergeant saluting a private. It broke every rule, every chain of protocol. But nobody moved. "Thank you, Private Presley," Miller said, his voice breaking. "You showed me what real strength looks like." Elvis straightened, returning the salute in perfect form. And one by one, 200 soldiers followed, saluting not the celebrity, but the soldier who had just proved that kindness could bring even the hardest man to his knees. That story spread faster than any song Elvis had ever sung. Within days, the entire base in Friedberg, West Germany, was whispering about that morning. The morning when a sergeant who once humiliated America's biggest star saluted him before 200 men. No one believed it until they heard it firsthand. Elvis didn't fight back. He didn't report the insult. He didn't seek revenge. He simply chose to do something small to help the man who hurt him. And with that simple act of humility, he earned something no fame could buy: respect. 6 weeks later, Sergeant James Miller returned to duty, walking with a cane. The first person he looked for wasn't his superior. It was Private Elvis Presley. The barracks went silent when he entered, finding Elvis quietly cleaning his rifle. "Presley," Miller said softly, "I owe you 2 things, my thanks and my apology." Elvis stood up, smiling gently. "There's nothing to apologize for, Sergeant. I just did what any soldier should do." Miller's voice trembled. "You taught me something 20 years in uniform. Never could that real strength isn't about rank or shouting louder than everyone else. It's about how we treat people, even when they don't deserve it." From that day forward, the two became unlikely friends. Elvis still woke before dawn, still cleaned, marched, and worked like any other private. But something had shifted. No one saw him as a pampered celebrity anymore. They saw a true soldier. Humble and grounded. The soldiers who witnessed that morning carried it with them for life. Years later, they told their children about the day. They watched Elvis Presley turn humiliation into grace and hate into brotherhood. Sergeant Miller often repeated in his later speeches, "Real strength isn't being the loudest man in the room. It's staying calm when everyone else is shouting." Presley taught me that you can defeat someone with power, or you can reach them with character. He chose the latter, and that's why he won forever. On that October morning in 1958, Elvis Presley didn't need music, lights, or applause to perform something extraordinary. He simply chose kindness, and it echoed louder than any song he ever sang. When Elvis finally left Germany, 200 soldiers stood in formation to salute him. No cameras, no flowers, just silence and respect. He walked away into the cold wind, carrying with him the one thing fame could never buy: true honor. More than half a century has passed since that cold October morning in Friedberg, yet, for those who stood on that training field, the memory remains crystal clear. Elvis Presley, once the king of rock and roll, standing silently in uniform. No spotlight, no applause. Just a man showing what it means to bow with dignity. They still remember how, when Sergeant Miller was carried into the ambulance, 200 soldiers stood frozen, in perfect silence. Not out of command, but out of awe. Because they had just witnessed a kind of strength rarely seen in the military, the strength of grace. Elvis didn't need to prove himself. He didn't fight back. He chose silence, humility, and kindness in a world that rewards the loudest voice. And in doing so, he became greater than any crown, any fame, any song. Years later, when asked about his time in Germany, Elvis said softly, "The army taught me that real strength doesn't come from shouting, it comes from keeping your heart steady in the storm." Maybe that's why those 200 soldiers never forgot the look in his eyes that day: calm, human, quietly powerful. Because for once, they weren't looking at a celebrity. They were looking at a good man, a man who proved, once and for all, that real strength doesn't scream. It whispers through kindness, through humility, through the way we treat those who try to hurt us.